nice article in the Managing Madrid blog. Wonderful lads that do a great job there. And worth reading about that man there. Karim Benzema needs to rest, and the numbers reveal why.
Times ended up almost looking like a 6-3-1. Some very good writing about that on the Managing Madrid website. First-rate podcast as well. Of course, Fede Valverde was a huge part of the equation.
Hello and welcome to a Saturday edition of the Managing Madrid Podcast. I'm your host, Kiyan, Sobhani, and I'm joined tonight by Mehedi Hassan, who is not in his car as the day turns to night, as he was on the post-game podcast after the Shakhtar game over on patreon.com/Managing Madrid with our patrons on the Zoom call. He is just in a normal room with a nice microphone. He's actually matching his room with his shirt. I don't know if that was intentional or not, but that's happening. I'm dragging this intro out, Mehedi, because I've always taken great pride in the ability to talk for hours about nothing. And today, I think that day, finally, the exception to the rule has arrived. I'm not sure what to make sense of what I just watched. I've been doing a post-game podcast for every single Real Madrid game since 2015. Very few have been as uneventful as the one we just witnessed. So really none of that matters because Real Madrid won, and that's what we always want. We want the W. It's not always fun going to the Coliseum Alfonso Perez because it's a grind out game that we have also lost. We've actually lost it as recently as last year. So we're gonna try to drag as much as we can out of the barrel here for tonight and break it down as best we can. But Mehedi, where do you want to start with this one? How do you make sense of it?
Yeah, hey, Kiyan, thanks for having me on the pod again. So, well, I like those, spooky kind of Real Madrid trivias. We've spoken about them once or twice before as well. I think even during the live Toronto pod. So this game reminds me of a game of another Carlo Ancelotti second season at Real Madrid. There was a game during the 22-match unbeaten streak in 2014-15. I cannot remember the opponent over here, but that game was exactly like this. And Iker Casillas, he said at the end of the game that, well, you need these kind of games to win a league title. Well, we didn't win the league title that season, but Ancelotti, second season, in the midst of an unbeaten streak. So that was probably the only deja vu I found in this game. But coming to the game itself, I think we can start talking about the selection choices and probably how the first 20 minutes of this game unfolded, because I think there were still some exciting things happening during the first 20 minutes, I would say. First 18 to 20 minutes, and then things just went stale and they never came back. And also, I think there are things that we can discuss regarding how Ancelotti is managing rotations. Well, he has managed rotations pretty well so far, but I think there are some interesting points there that we can discuss. But it is true that there is not much really to discuss specifically about the game. So that's where I stand.
Well, it's interesting because we've had goalless games, and to be fair, I obviously exaggerating a little bit because there have definitely been games where we've been really kind of bored just trying to analyze it. We're trying to bring some life to the discussion. We're trying to we also have a job to make this podcast entertaining, so people are entertained when they're listening to their commute. It's not too nerdy. We try to do our best, but there were definitely games, especially during the pandemic and when Zidane initially came back and we actually won a league title, so not to complain too much, but there definitely was a lot of games that were just tight-knit, 0-0s, 1-0s, with little chance creation. There was one game in particular, I think it was against Alaves, where we had 0.17 on the XG chart, and we were really creating nothing. There have been games like that. I think also what differentiates other goalless games or small or narrow margin victories like 1-0s like this is that sometimes there's just things happening in 0-0s. Like there's events, there's fights, there's brawls, there's like heavy challenges. Maybe there's a red card. Maybe a couple players get into it. There was no fights today. There wasn't anything like that. And I kind of expected it from Getafe, to be honest, but that didn't happen today. But you put an interesting point. You said like after the first 20 minutes, it kind of grew stale. And I think what was interesting about this game and this opponent is that at no point did Getafe really open up at all. Like, we created chances. Ancelotti said after the game, we defended well. And he's true. He's right. Well, we also Lunin had to like do nothing basically. Congrats to Lunin who got his first clean sheet of his Real Madrid career. It was like minute 90 when the linesman puts up the number 4 for 4 minutes injury time. And you're like, are Getafe just going to accept that they're just going to stay in this defensive shell until 93? Like, is there going to be any point in this game where they're just going to open up? There was no, usually in games like this, what happens in the second half is that the opponent actually opens up a little bit. And so you start to make subs, you start to take advantage of space in transition. There was no moment like that in this game where it opened up. Getafe just remained what they were from minute 1 to 90. And that was, I think, what was kind of unique about this one.
Yeah, I think the only moment specifically I can remember was probably around that 20th minute mark when Getafe had, brought the ball back from the right and then he squared it to their left back, I guess. And then he put a ball back in, which Mayoral missed. Like, if he gets anything on that ball, it's a goal for Getafe. But Mayoral, like, Castilla boy forever. Thankfully, he didn't. And that was it. I honestly don't remember anything more exciting than that. And I also do believe that was probably Getafe's best chance of the game as well. I don't know if I'm missing anything out apart from that. But yeah, that was it. What did you make of our front three today? Because I was doing a pre-game pod for Madrid Batar in Bengali. There we were discussing that maybe Ancelotti is going with Fede, Rodyrgo, and Vinicius and not giving Hazard or Asensio a starting role because he is rotating with his defense. He tweaked his defense a bit with Mehedi out and Alaba playing left back. He is also bringing in two guys, Modric and Kiyan, who haven't they didn't start in the previous game. So Chouameni was the only one who started in the previous game. So basically, that's why he probably wanted to go with his available best forward line, which I do believe if Benzema is not there, Valverde, Rodyrgo, and Vinicius is our available best front three. What did you make of that?
I think
like the selection of the front three.
Well, obviously, I had no issue with the front selection because these three have given us so much in the absence of Benzema. They've played so well. And I think, like, to be fair, I think what has happened in the last couple of games is that, I mean, particularly against Shakhtar, when Benzema was on the field, obviously, we actually, there was a clear lack of efficiency in terms of our sharpness in front of goal and putting chances away. But the actual build-up itself, you and I talked about this with Sam and Ewan on the post-game podcast, the build-up itself was actually really good. And so it gave us a lot of optimism what that front four can do together. And in this game, obviously, it was a front three. It was more of a 4-3-3. It was not what we saw against Shakhtar at all. It was something different. They had to face a pretty deep block where Getafe, as little as they did going forward, and to put things into perspective, you remember that Fede Valverde shot from our own half?
Yeah.
That one, 0.01 on the XG chart. That's like pretty much on par with like Getafe's best chance. Like that's what Getafe were giving us on the other side, in when they were attacking us. And what I think we were facing was like a team that was really adamant about just plugging holes, making things difficult. I'm sure it's part of their identity, but I'm sure they saw those games like against Atletico in the first half where Any team that plays the high line, it's absolutely suicidal. So pick your poison, and I think they're well within their rights to play this way if they want to give their best shot at taking a result home. To your question, everything the front three did, and by extension the midfield were doing, because Getafe would let us bring the ball out of the back, but then they would just focus on plugging holes. Every run that we made in the half space. You remember that Vinicius header where he was free in the box?
Yeah.
It was right at Soria. That one was in minute... Or sorry, it was Rodyrgo, not Vinicius.
It was Rodyrgo. Vinicius was just behind, yeah.
Yeah, Rodyrgo. That was the 38th minute. That actually was a really nice sequence from us, like offensively. It took us a while to generate that. Our movement was good. We had a lot of movement between the lines. Our passing was good. If you look at that, I'd be curious to go back and look at that. But if you go look at that build-up to that goal, or to that shot, we had a lot of players in the right zones. We were facing a deep block and being imaginative on how to break it. We had a player in every half space, in both half spaces. We had overloads. We had movement in the central areas, and then we worked it around. Eventually, we were able to cross it, and Rodyrgo has a free header. But that's what it took, and that didn't happen that often. And apart from that, I think in the second half, if you fast forward, Vinicius has a nice play where he carries the ball down the field. He cuts it right. He cuts it back to Chouameni in the box. Chouameni shoots it right at Soria. Modric has a rebound. He also shoots at Soria, or it gets blocked or something. Those are the chances we were looking at. And apart from that, it was long-distance shooting, and terrible long-distance shooting. Camavinga, Valverde had one finally good one in the second half, but Camavinga, Fede, Modric, our shooting boots were way off. Just to bring it up here, Rodyrgo 5 shots, only 1 on target. Chouameni 3 shots, only 1 on target. Fede Valverde 3 shots, only 1 on target. I think those were the key ones that were, the rest of the shots were kind of just not from great positions. And so I think the front three struggled today, in part obviously because there was a lack of space, but also when we did get into good positions or even decent positions, we just did not have our shooting boots on. Our shooting has been pretty bad for 2 games straight now.
Yes, I do agree. And we have to ponder that at what point does it become a serious concern, because not even 2 games, I would say, even against Osasuna we weren't really great with our it is taking our chances. So it's 3 games. So
yep.
I hope that is the end of it. Against Shakhtar we pick ourselves up, and against Barcelona we definitely don't do this. Another thing I would like to talk about is the point that you brought up, that Rodyrgo header and the kind of movement or the kind of sequence that header stemmed from. If you go back and see that, you'd see that there was a bit more poise, there was a bit more composure in picking the moments when we make which run, which basically created that chance. Now, against these low blocks, low blocks has been Real Madrid's issue since 1678. But again, you have to basically pick your moments and make those off-ball runs that will move the opponent. There is no other way apart from breaking this kind of a low block without moving your opponent. You can't just move the ball around if the opponent is just standing still. But when you make those kind of intelligent runs off ball, those things create these little spaces of pockets and or pocket of space, and then you can bring out these kind of chances. That made me a little bit frustrated, because if you can do it once or twice, why can't you do it throughout the game? And I mean, what I mean to say is why can't you have a bit more composure throughout the game? I think in terms of picking our moments when to move and when to release the ball, and picking the teammate who is on a run or taking an off-ball run, we lacked a little bit of composure there. We were a little bit rushed with just giving the ball away at certain stages. That hurt us a little bit. So these are very minor things, little details that if you fix within a team, the outcome would be drastically different. And but it's just that kind of a night that those things didn't happen for us.
I think the answer to your question about like why can't you generate more of those chances and stay composed and whatever, I don't know if there's quite a real answer for it. It's a good question, but I think the reality is that a lot of this is psychological, right? So, you know, there are instances where a team like Getafe can recognize that they just conceded a free header and adjust to it, and so you can't maybe generate it again. Ancelotti said after the game that there are some games where the ball is at your feet and things just feel effortless. You don't have to think twice. Everything just flows. Everyone just is composed. Everyone is playing well. Then there are games like this where you just don't have that for sometimes inexplicable reasons. You know, I'm sure like it's basically we can all relate to a smaller scale in our lives. Sometimes things just flow effortlessly for us. Sometimes it's just a hard day, you know. Sometimes it's just harder to get those little mundane tasks done for whatever reason. And a lot of it is mental. It could be related to a lot of things. This, to be fair, is not necessarily the easiest place to play for Real Madrid. And it's interesting, like we think about breaking down low blocks, and you mentioned this has been a problem for us in the past. It's interesting to see the evolution of how we deal with this. For years, it was crossing. You know, I think when Zidane got a lot of shtick for crossing so much, at the very least, there was a period of time where it totally made sense to cross when you have Cristiano Ronaldo and Gareth Bale and Benzema as well. Like, if you have, like, world-class crossers like Marcelo and Kroos and Modric and Carvajal, and you have elite aerial players like that, it makes sense. Plus the chaos that ensued. It wasn't just the crosses. It would be the headers, the rebound, the fact that the teams couldn't clear and then they couldn't escape their half. That actually worked for a certain period of time. Then it kind of worked, but not really at times, because like there were games where we were like crossing to Lucas Vazquez, you know. But then it kind of worked when he would send Ramos and Casemiro up the field. You know, that era seems so long gone now. When you look at it, we had 11 crosses today. And we just don't have players on the field to take advantage of that. Until Mariano came in, you know. And Mariano didn't do much. I don't even know how many minutes he was on the field. He was on the field for
1 minute.
Came on the 88th minute, so plus the stoppage time, like let's say 6 maximum minutes he was in.
Understats showing it for some reason.
Yeah. And so we tried to break them down in other ways. And like I don't think we did that bad of a job. Like obviously I think relatively speaking it was underwhelming. But we did, you know, we came up with that Rodyrgo chance was pretty big in the first half. We had the disallowed goal in the second half. The play where Tchouaméni and Modric should have, I think, in my opinion, like Modric's was, I guess, a little bit more difficult because his path was a little blocked, but Tchouaméni should have, I think, done better on his chance. And then we had just a high volume of really bad long-distance shots. It was a tough one to break down. I want to be worried about it and I guess be more concerned in some way, but at the same time, this is kind of like the Osasuna game. It just exists every year. Every year we have games like this, and at least we got the W today, and we can just move on and hopefully just get some momentum. My biggest concern is I just want us to kind of open the ketchup bottle a little bit before Clasico. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'm so sorry for Shakhtar to be in the way of this, but I really hope Benzema just comes out, scores one early against Shakhtar, and then we just keep going, and then 4-5-0. Apologize to them after the game, and then just take the momentum to Clasico, because I really just feel like we need something, the floodgates to open from a scoring standpoint.
Yeah, this reminds me of, I think, the day we won the league last season. Who were we playing? Levante, I guess. We scored 6 past them, and then all of our players apologized to them, and they got relegated. We were champions. That was kind of funny. Yeah. Something like that needs to happen against Shakhtar. Another thing I guess we can talk about is Madrid's shape early on in the first half, and bit further in the second half as well. Because if you go ahead and take a look at Fede Valverde's heat map, you'll see his most touches were a place where you would see that if he's playing as a wide midfielder or as a right wing back. And even during the game, I noticed that quite a lot. It was kind of like Vinicius and Rodyrgo were playing as the left winger and the forward, but the right winger was not there. He was on the same vertical line as, or rather horizontal line as Carvajal. That was a bit interesting to me. I don't know if that was to counter Getafe's left winger in any way, or to stop them from that flank. But that was kind of interesting because he was not partaking in Madrid's press that high. Modric was from that right side, and Vinicius and Rodrygo were. That's one thing I found interesting, especially during the first half.
Well, Rodrygo was more similar to the classic Benzema role today, in that he was mostly on the left, trying to combine with Vinicius. And I think in some ways it worked, but that's obviously just going to be a natural distinguishing factor between him playing as a false nine and him playing as a pseudo 10, as he did against Shakhtar. Against Shakhtar, he could play a little bit deeper. He can kind of combine a little bit more with the midfield. And in this game, he was a little bit more, just trying to combine and overload the left side with Vinicius. And I thought Vinicius played well. Rodrygo. We'll get to Vinicius in a second. I thought Rodrygo's confidence in tight spaces looks really good. He did go over the right a couple of times and link up with Fede. He's able to create space for his own shot. Again, a little bit maybe unlucky, if you want to put it that way, on his goal. It was a good finish. It was ruled out for offside. He had good attempts and good, well-intentioned things. I think part of my reason with this, part of my quote-unquote boredom with this game is not necessarily a frustration aimed at Real Madrid were terrible and we're screwed, season's over. It was more just just bored. I was just bored. That's all it was. It was a tough game. Vinicius did what he could. He had the dribbling sequences to break lines, to carry the ball up the field, to look for his teammates in the box. Magic dribbling sequences. He had good defensive work rate in this game too, which no one will talk about. I think I've seen some people complain about his touches being too cute or whatever, but he was fine, and I think he created danger and he worked hard defensively. I don't really have necessarily a problem with Real Madrid's performance in a vacuum, because I think it was a difficult one. It was just the efficiency, and there was zero entertainment value, and that's just me personally, just being an old man at a cloud. But I think almost everyone related to it, that it was just a really, really tough one to sit through. So the performance itself wasn't terrible, but it was just hard. It was laborious.
Yeah, Vinicius absolutely loves nutmegging Jene. I think he did it last season at the Bernabeu as well, and that was a filthy, ridiculous nutmeg. Today, he did the same to Jene again. So Jene of Getafe, he absolutely hates Vinicius' guts by this point, I'm pretty sure. And I think it's Luis Milla who came out after the post-match, mix zone, and he said that Vinicius was not intending to play football. He was just trying to get under everyone's nerves. Well, yeah, dude, probably he got under your nerve at least.
I'm amazed these quotes like this are still coming out.
Yeah. Vinicius, I think he was fine. Whatever, you could whenever he was on the ball, you would probably get a little bit excited. All right, something's gonna happen. Vinicius has got the ball, and he made some things happen as well in those first 20 minutes of the game. One sequence I specifically remember, I actually kept notes of this game until the 26th minute, and then I'm like, all right, that's it. On the 26th minute, Camavinga plays this. That was probably Camavinga's only great progressive pass in this game.
The ball down the line to Vinicius.
Down the line to Vinicius. That was a good move. It didn't yield it to anything, but I thought that was a good move. What did you make of Camavinga's performance, though? What are you standing on Camavinga on this one?
Quiet. Quiet, very quiet.
Quiet.
I mean, I think it's funny because when you think of breaking low blocks as a midfielder, obviously he has a completely different profile to Kroos, but one of Camavinga's underrated strengths is that he moves well between the lines off the ball. And he's able to break lines that way because he's unpredictable with his movement. And once he gets the ball in those positions, he's good in tight spaces. And especially if he's in the attacking third, he can create space for his own shot, or he can combine with someone in the box. But that in itself is really good. When you look at our profile of midfielders, we had everything we needed on the field to break. The same thing with Modric. Modric's ability to dribble, to carry the ball, to create something out of nothing. You want him, that moment of genius, you want him on the field for that. Tchouaméni as well. I think it's funny because Tchouaméni, his role as an anchor, like what I liked, the dynamic with Shakhtar that I liked is that Kroos could play the deep quarterback role and Tchouaméni could just fly up the field. Like in games like this where you don't really need to worry about transition defense, could we have sent Tchouaméni up in the box a little bit more? And just have Modric or Camavinga step back a little bit. And actually, for that reason, I think Kroos in this game would have made a lot of sense. You know, if he was able to play. And you know, so again, I think we had enough on the field to do it this way with this team, obviously. But I think Camavinga was a little bit too quiet for me. He just was not that involved. You know, there were a couple moments here and there. His shooting was bad. He tried at least one. And Modric was a bit of a mixed bag too. Like when you look at Modric, he had a little bit of good, a little bit of bad. Some of his passing in this game was really, really poor. Bad giveaways. Shooting wasn't great, but he also had a couple of really nice interceptions. Kickstarted a few transition attacks that were rare, but they were needed at the time, but that we just couldn't capitalize on. He had some magical touches under pressure in midfield. And with Tchouaméni, again, like because you don't, I think part of the reason why Tchouaméni as well was quiet was because, you know, a lot of his stuff from the anchor role will go unnoticed. Like what notes, I'm willing to bet you and I have the least amount of notes about Rodyrgo, Militao, and basically anyone in the backline. We just didn't notice them because they weren't needed. Yeah. They weren't called upon. And so I would have liked to have seen Tchouaméni venture up the field a little bit more because when he did, again, we nearly scored off of it. So the function of the midfield was a little bit too, I think we just needed a little bit more from maybe the deeper positions as well to get involved because they're really not worrying about transition defense in games like this.
Yeah, and I don't know if the lethargy, I did notice some lethargy in this game. It was, I think, a bit of physical and bit of psychological as well. Because if you look at like touches, Vinicius had 65 touches in this game, and so did Camavinga. And Rodrygo had like 56 touches. So for an interior midfielder, I think that's pretty low. That you're two forwards and you have the same number of touches. What I would like to see from Camavinga when he's been given these starting roles in these games, that he takes a bit more time on the ball. It's not just about like you get the ball and pass it immediately to someone. Probably he needs to upgrade a little bit on his screening of space in front of him. And he's a good player on the ball. He is a good ball carrier as well. I didn't see much of ball carrying. Well, like against the low block, how far are you going to carry it anyway? But that's what I would like to see from Camavinga when he's been when you talk about game states a lot, when he's given the starting game state. That's what I'd like to see. I think he's generally better when he's in a different game state, when he's coming after the 70th minute. He needs to do something immediately. He thinks better. He does better things back then. But when it's like an open canvas, on that front, I think he's struggling a little bit. But I think he's gonna get his chances. The season's still long. But those are my Camavinga thoughts.
Well, again, it's it's interesting because the game state didn't really change at all in this game. I mean, when Asensio came on, there was 2 to 3 moments where he actually was able to get into transition, and I thought his touches were pretty good in this game. But again, the game state just didn't change much for this game to budge at all, and I think that was definitely part of the problem. It was just hard. Like Getafe, their defense held up. Like it was a good defensive line. It was organized. Their rotations were quick. They plugged both flanks. Like they had coverage on cut-ins from both flanks. You know, they were in that 5-3-2 kind of deep mid block. Didn't press, packing the box, and it was just hard to break. And that was the reality. And there was that little bit of lethargy too, as well, that you mentioned. And we just didn't really find a way to break them down consistently, and when we did break them down, our finishing boots weren't on. I'm just really trying to figure out how much. I mean, we can talk about Militao's goal. It was What was your assessment of it?
The goal reminded me of Ronaldo's second goal versus Wolfsburg in the 2016 Champions League semi-final, quarterfinal second leg, because he starts more like centrally and then like goes near the near post, and that angle it was a good goal, because that header is difficult to execute because if you're not like turning your head at the right moment, it's gonna go to your left. So I think it was a good goal. The goal obviously got me excited that, all right, this is it. This is going to be a bloodbath. It's going to be 6-0, 7-0 from here on. But that didn't happen at all. But other than that, I think the goal was pretty good. What I do want to talk about, and I actually have a question for you. Well, we have discussed Ancelotti rotations so many times, and before the issue was that he doesn't rotate ever, and currently what he's doing up until now, I'm still satisfied with how our rotations is going on. But do you think there is a point in the season where we have to tone it down a little bit? Because do you think it is affecting our consistency of performances? Because especially with the backline, where probably the chemistry is more important than any other area of the pitch. Like, how long do we keep doing this? That one day it's Rodyrgo Militao, the other day is Alaba Militao, the other day is like Nacho Rudiger. I think we've been changing up our defense a bit too much. That's just like my personal opinion. Where do you stand on it? Like, are we really rotating too much, or if we're rotating just fine now, going forward into the season, is there a place where we tone it or like bring it back a little bit and have more of a consistent lineup, or at least 7 or 8 players consistently throughout in the 11?
I'm not worried about this issue right now, because I think everyone we have right now understands each other. I think we have a good system right now, because it's not like there's a bunch of new players who don't know each other. You know, if you slide in Kroos or Camavinga or Modric or whoever, you're not going to have a situation of unfamiliarity. Likewise with any of the attackers right now, with Rodrygo, Vinicius, Fede, etc., Benzema. The backline is, I mean, Rudiger is the new face. Tchouaméni is a new face who has been basically one of the few ones who hasn't been rotated. So, I mean, no arguments there. He's needed to play, and he has played, and he's played well. The defensive line, I think there's an argument there for sure. I'm personally surprised that Rudiger hasn't cracked the starting 11 yet. I personally think, based on how good he is our best defender, central defender. Having said that, Militao's been good. And I think, we discussed this on the post-game pod for Shakhtar, that, the competition has been good for him probably with bringing Rudiger in. I'm not too worried about that aspect of it, to be honest with you. I would much rather this than having a stationary 11 of players that don't play.
Yeah.
It's also not like it's like relatively tight. I mean, there are a few players who are not getting cracked into the rotation that regularly. Like Hazard played against Celtic, and then played against, what was the next game? Mallorca,
I think.
And then we haven't seen him since. Yeah. Asensio he's kind of on the fringes. He comes in towards the end in some games. He doesn't really, Nacho was reliable anytime he comes in. I'm fine. I like the way we're doing this now, because last year I think the changes in the season came when we basically started rotating more. Like once Ancelotti realized like we really need Camavinga and Rodrygo to really take on a bigger role off the bench in the Champions League, that's when the season changed. And so now that we're using these guys more regularly, I think it's been good. So I'm not particularly worried about that aspect because it's not a team that needs that much time to mesh together, because they literally won 2 titles together last season. And the 2 players who were signed, one of them is playing every game basically, and the other one, Rudiger, seems to have a pretty good understanding with everybody and hasn't played poorly at all. Like since in every game he's played, so I'm not too worried about him. I did want to go back to the Militao goal for 1 second because, it's a very simple goal, and obviously everyone was like going crazy because we actually finally scored from a set piece. First of all, I also don't think there were people in my mentions who were like, well, Cruz finally isn't there. We score from a set piece. I think it's ridiculous because it's not Cruz. If you look at Cruz's set pieces, they're good. It's not like he can't control. If he's putting the ball on literally someone's head and it doesn't go in, that's not, there's nothing you can do about that. But what I liked about Militao's run in this one is that the way he shakes off Mitrovic, he kind of fakes to go one way, then curls around and goes to the near post. It's nothing to analyze. I don't want to overanalyze it, but it was just a simple, straightforward, good sequence where Militao shakes his defender, curls around and cuts the near post and gets his head on it. I think there may have been a deflection as well, but I'm not 100% sure on that. It was a good goal. So yeah, ended up being the difference maker.
I saw a crazy piece of stat on one of the Madrid news portals on Twitter. In the last 2 games, Real Madrid had 52 goal attempts, 21 of them on target, and 3 goals out of those 21. So that's how bad our shooting has been.
Well, but that's something to consider though as a good thing. As I said in the Shakhtar post game, that we're right now, we won these last 2 games despite not finishing, and also despite this season not having Benzema of last season yet join the team, is a good sign to me rather than a bad sign, because that stuff will come into place and that'll just only make us better and harder to stop. So I consider that as a good thing. But yeah, it is definitely a mark on the lack of efficiency for sure right now, and that's something that needs to be addressed. Also, Militao is our 9th goal scorer this season after 9 games.
Wow.
Wow. Would you have expected to have been in this position now had you been told Benzema would basically not have scored and had missed all this time?
No, absolutely. Like I'm not even gonna pretend that I saw this coming, because I was petrified. I was terrified when Benzema got injured. I'm like, all right, I've seen this picture before. This is going to be like 17-18 again. This is going to be like 18-19 again. We're going to be like 1 points behind Barcelona by November in the league. But how the team has responded is really impressive. And everything, like all of this is like contextual in the sense that Real Madrid, we have done, I think, a fair bit of analysis of where the team can improve, or that some of the things that have not been going our way. For example, the shooting, breaking low blocks, for example, against Osasuna today again. But even, considering all of that, we have only not won 1 game this season. I think we've played like 12 games, but and we've won all of them except the Osasuna game. So all in all, I think the team is in a good place, but I think it's just the curse of being a Real Madrid fan, that always expecting a little bit extra from your team, no matter how well you play.
The standards are always higher here.
Expectation. Yeah, the standards are like I would say like the highest of any football club, at least in club football. So from that perspective, we do analyze and talk about these things. But overall, I think the team is in a good space.
So I just wanted to make a note on that comment because I think it's important for the club to have those standards. I think it doesn't matter too much necessarily, like, fans like us to have those standards or not. Because I've always been a little bit more on the empathy side, like, because I don't want to feel like seem too spoiled to like ask for perfection every game. I forget who said it, one of our players, but it's obvious for anyone to see, quote or no quote. But basically, the reason why we have so many titles is because our standards are higher. When the famous quote after we won the 14th title last year, when Modric is in the locker room talking about the 15th, that's the standard, right? It doesn't, like, it matters for them, the club, the players, to have that standard. But like I suppose for me to come here and be like, well, the standard should be this, and we should be playing to perfection. I just feel silly doing that. So, because it doesn't matter what I think. So, like, I'm more empathetic that, because I've been watching Real Madrid for so long, like since 1998, that I just know every year these games, there's no year where these games don't exist, and it's just you got to grind it out. You got to grind it out. You got to grind it out, and where you want to make sure ultimately is you have enough points to win the league at the end of the season. And by extension, you also want to show up in the Champions League when it matters. And then if you don't, again, perfection doesn't exist. And we've done it more than anyone. So that's where my perception always comes in, like trying to catch myself and being like, yeah, these are the standards. Yeah, it is. But I also just want to be like cognizant of the fact that these guys are not robots, and they do what they can in games like this away to Getafe. Yeah. So did we drag out 40, 50 minutes out of this somehow?
Oh, did we? I
don't know.
I have no idea for how long we've talked.
You do these like pieces after the game, like you kind of bring in some visuals and analytics. Mm-hmm. What, like, if you were to do one for this game, what would you do it on?
For this game, I think one of like the Fede positioning that I discussed, probably that is something I would still like to go back and look at visually, that actually where his, like, I can see in the heat map where his touches were, or probably where he received the ball, because that kind of felt interesting to me, because at large stretches this didn't feel like a 4-3-3. It felt like more like a 4-4-2. To me, that's something that I would be interested to see. Apart from that, there is nothing more really on this game. The only other thing I would probably try to look into is Alaba's positioning, because Alaba previously, when he's paired with Vinicius as a left back, one key difference with Alaba and Mehedi I've observed is Mehedi is more closer to the flank. Alaba tries to stay a little bit inverted. I don't know if this is by design or this is just the freedom of expression that I spoke about in the last pod that Ancelotti provides to his players, and then they decide, all right, this is the best position for me today. Today I didn't see that. Alaba was more like in the Mendy-esque positions. He was more closer to the flank rather than being in inverted positions. That I felt like watching it, I would have to like check with the data if that really was the case. But that works with Vinicius if Alaba is a little bit inverted, and Alaba is like an extremely smart footballer, when to pick those runs, when to decide and make those runs behind Vinicius. That actually opens up a little bit more space for Vinicius. I am Team Lucas on who should start at left back for Real Madrid. I'm not Team Kiyan. I think our backline should be Carvajal, Militao, Rodyrgo, and Alaba. Yeah, those are the only two things I would be interested in: Fede and Alaba.
Well, again, it's funny. Like I just have nothing on the backline today. Like nothing. Rodyrgo had like a couple good step up interventions. Militao, a couple good reads. He had one play where he carries the ball up the right wing and then cuts it into Rodyrgo at the top of the box. It was one of those weird games where you're not really getting overloads from your fullbacks, and they just have no defensive things to do, nothing to do defensively. There's nothing like, you don't have like the classic flying slide tackle from Militao in the box to save a goal. There's nothing like that in this game. And it was just hard to really discuss anything from the backline other than that, you know, maybe they could have been on the ball. They got a lot of touches, but like, because you were going over the touches today and said, like, you know, Vinicius, same number of Camavinga. I think Rodrygo had like 56, a little bit less. But even though they had less touches, you noticed them more because they were at least they were trying to have these sequences in the attacking third. All the touches for the backline, Carvajal I think led the team in touches, 117, something like that. Do you remember any of Carvajal's touches?
No, not really. I was expecting that Carvajal at some point would be subbed out for Lucas Vazquez because Lucas has been out for a while and probably this was a good game for him to get a few minutes. On that note, actually, I think had we not been 1-0 up in this game, Eden Hazard, Lucas Vazquez, these guys would have gotten minutes today. Ancelotti then would, I think, he would decide that, all right, let's change things up a little bit more and see if we can get something out of it. But because we were 1-0 up, he just wanted to have the things that were going on. But back to Carvajal again. I don't remember anything specific, but that Rodyrgo header on that sequence, I think Carvajal was essential during that sequence, if I remember correctly. He was very involved in that sequence. That Rodyrgo header that had a high XG.
Was it him that crossed it or Modric? I can't remember. One of those two.
Yeah, one of those two.
So
actually, I can check it.
So, you said something there.
It was Fede who crossed the ball.
Yeah, Fede. So, you said something that I wanted to touch on.
Mendy, Alaba?
No. Oh, Hazard. I was just there definitely was a moment in the back of my brain that thought, like, you know, a game like this might suit Hazard because he won't have many defensive duties. And all he needs to do, and like, you know, in Celtic, against Celtic, he and with Belgium, plays pretty deep, just trying to like play make from deep positions. He could have done that in this game, and I think it would have been helpful to some extent. Like, he wouldn't have, I think, clogged the space of Vinicius and Rodrygo and gotten in the way of those guys, but I think he would have just helped Modric create from deep and just be a secondary creator in that offense in the build-up. And maybe help create something. But ultimately it was Mariano.
Have you been to the Coliseum before? Getafe Stadium? Have you been there before?
No, I was thinking it was Leganés that I went to, not Getafe. Yeah, no, I haven't.
Yeah, because I think at throughout the game, there were a lot of Real Madrid fans in the stadium, I guess.
Yeah,
because our players were like getting clapped and cheered on. Yeah.
Well, it's a combination of two things.
That was interesting.
Yeah, combination of two things. One is that it's in Madrid, and two, it's Getafe doesn't like have a massive, huge supporting of like cult followers. So a lot of the people who will go to that game are probably Real Madrid fans anyway. Mm-hmm. Yeah. There was a Juanito chance also in the 7th minute. I noticed that. Yeah, it's not uncommon. All right, how much can you drag this out more? I don't know how much I can.
I don't really have anything more to add. Basically, the last thing probably I can just point out is Ancelotti was asked again about Hazard that he hasn't played a single minute in the last 5 games, and Carlo basically said he's gonna have his chance very soon, and the Madrid news accounts on Twitter have the word "very" in capital. So I don't know if he's gonna have some minutes against Shakhtar. I don't really see it. I don't really see him starting because Benzema's going to start that game since he missed out on this one. And Vinicius, I've never seen Vinicius get rested. Ancelotti was asked about it last season, and he said he's 20 years old. He doesn't need rest. So maybe as a sub, but then again, Ancelotti says this all the time, like, I trust Hazard, and like then he doesn't play. So I'm not really buying it. He's gonna get it very soon.
I don't follow those Madrid Twitter accounts because nothing they say is like in proper context. Ancelotti did not say it like that. There's certainly no need to capitalize the word very. First of all, I'm not even sure if he even used the word muy. And if he did, he wasn't like muy cerca. It was like he said it in passing. It's not like, just think of like, imagine if like you asked me like, hey Kiyan, when are you gonna have your next Chick-fil-A meal? And I'd be like, very soon, Mehedi. You know, I think like you wouldn't be like, Kiyan said he's gonna have it very soon. It could be like, you wouldn't like capitalize the word very. It's just weird behavior.
Yeah.
But anyways, but hey, maybe it's against Shakhtar. Maybe it is very soon next game. Who knows? All right. I'm happy to wrap it here. Any concluding thoughts?
Me too.
Let's do it. Yeah.
Well, a happy Thanksgiving to Canadian fans who are listening from Canada. We have our Thanksgiving in October, a month before States. So yeah, just happy Thanksgiving to everyone who's celebrating.
So do you do the whole thing, like big dinner or anything? Are you doing anything tomorrow? Or Monday?
No, I'm like, it's a day off, so we don't really do anything in particular. I might just go out with friends and like have a big meal, but that probably won't be specifically for Thanksgiving. That's just because it's a long weekend. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
So I'm pacing myself. Hopefully I don't go too overboard tomorrow, but my mom's cooking, my dad's cooking, my aunt is cooking, my sister's cooking. It could be dangerous. So I gotta, hopefully it won't be, hopefully the damage control won't be too out of this world. I can just kind of go to the gym before and after and not go too overboard, but I am kind of worried. But yeah, hey, happy Thanksgiving to everybody. Happy Thanksgiving to you, all our listeners in Canada. And also, if you don't celebrate Thanksgiving, you're somewhere else in the world, happy Thanksgiving to you anyway. It's just an excuse to be grateful and also to eat. So go do that. Do both things. We're grateful for all our listeners, for sure. This podcast has grown tremendously. It's especially in the last year or so, the leap it's taken has been wild in the numbers, and also the family that has been it's been extended into this ever growing family. I'm not sure if I see the ceiling on it yet, but it's I'm super thankful for all you guys listening. So thank you, Mehedi. Happy Thanksgiving, my friend. We'll touch base soon.
Kiyan. Thanks so much.
All right, man.
Yep.
Take care. Peace.
Take care. Bye.
All right, you guys know the drill. Before we wrap this up and send you guys along on your way, we wanted to give a quick shout out to our patrons over on patreon.com/Managing Madrid, who do so much to support the show and also get a bunch of exclusive content, and they get to be a part of a Real Madrid family that is ever growing. We also want to give a specific shout out to our $10 plus patrons, because if you pledge $10 or more, not only do you get guaranteed responses to your questions, but you also get a specific shout out on the podcast. So shout out to these $10 plus patrons: Brandon Alvarez, Willie Reed, Will Sousa, Way Pairing, Wamik Jamal, Tobias Arroyo Botcher, Tariq Goktas, Talib Salhab, Tahmid Kalam, Sushank Damala, Sujai Wani, Sumanchu Singh, Sheikh Hatiri, Shamil Shabaz Sharapov, Sergio Arispe, Santos Solorzano, Samuli Justin, Samer Z, Said Mahad, Sai Mohan Sasikumar, Rodrigo Balmaceda, Rishi D, Phoenix, Peter Powell, Paulo Fierro, Patrick Diafari, Oscar Barrera, Nico Laxo, Nicolas Zapatero Zubiare, Nicholas Moller, Mowgli, MJ Diego, Nick Ribeiro, Michael Zinberg, Marin Myrtle, Matthew Atkins, Martin Ridman, Magnus Lext, Logan Stahl, Leon Savernakis, Kunal Tilakar, Crystal Glass, Kevin Rivera, Jose Cruz, John Fernandez, Jeff Thurston, Jason Fitz, Ian Marley, Graham Gerard, Gary Kohut, Frederick Antakiro, Frederick Sundros, Faisal Hamdan, S.A. Davisito, Eloy Enriquez, Edward Sossman, Daniel Williams, Con P, Christian Toft, Krishna Costa, Charles Williams, Brendan Powers, Brandon Stevens, Ashik Bashar, Armand Gashi, Armando L, Antons Rudenko, Anirudh Singh, Ananya Kumar, Alex Thyberg, Al, Azaz Hussein, Adrian Rios, Adar Zalukovic, Adam Dorsey, Bella Chow, Varun, Ramtin Maghrur, Fabian Moreno, and Daniel Smith. You guys are legends. Thank you so much for your support. We'll see you over on patreon.com/managing Madrid soon. Bonus shows coming this week. And Hala Madrid.